Hey everyone. Tonight we don't begin with victory marches or generals giving orders. We begin in the mud cold, endless and alive. It's 1916 and men are learning how to sleep inside hell. Imagine closing your eyes while the ground shakes. Rats crawl over your chest, and your best friend's body keeps you warm. They dreamed not of medals, but of dry socks, warm tea, and 10 minutes of silence. Some prayed, others drank. Most just stared into the dark, waiting for a sleep that never truly came. This isn't about bravery, it's about an exhaustion so deep it became a religion. So tell me, if you were there, would you try to rest or stay awake until dawn? Drop your answer in the comments below. No neutral ground. If this glimpse into forgotten trenches shook you, hit like to keep these stories alive. Subscribe for more dark corners of history. And share this with someone who still believes war ends when the guns go silent. Now, take a deep breath and follow me down into how soldiers slept in the trenches. As you settle deeper into this story, try to feel the weight of the air around you, thick with the unspoken dread of a perpetual twilight. It is France, 1916. You are here, nestled within the labyrinthine embrace of the trenches, where the very earth seems to sigh a heavy, tired breath. The sun has long since dipped below the scarred horizon, and its departure, rather than bringing peace, ushers in a deeper, more profound darkness. This isn't the gentle, comforting dark of a peaceful night. It's a consuming void, pressing in from all sides, amplifying every fear, every ache. Listen closely. In the distance, the artillery echoes. It's not a sudden, jarring burst, but a rhythmic, almost melancholic thrum, like the tired, faltering heartbeat of the entire front line. Each boom vibrates through the damp earth beneath you, a low rumble that becomes a constant companion, a sinister lullaby. It reminds you that even in these moments of relative quiet, the war continues its relentless march. The ground trembles slightly with each distant explosion, a subtle tremor as familiar as your own pulse. You feel it in your bones, a deep-seated vibration that never truly leaves. Around you, the men stir restlessly, ghosts in the gloom. They close their eyes, not in anticipation of slumber, but as a desperate, fleeting attempt to shut out the relentless symphony of suffering. The air is a tapestry of screams, not always audible, but felt, echoing in the mind from previous moments, from the memories of friends now gone. There are the scuttling sounds of rats, unseen but ever present, their rustling movements a constant invasion of your personal space, a cold reminder of the decay that surrounds you. And then there is the smell, the acrid, clinging scent of gunpowder, a harsh chemical bite that stings your nostrils and coats your tongue. It's a bitter taste of war that permeates everything. No one here truly sleeps, not in the way you understand it. Sleep is a luxury, a distant memory from another life. What happens here is something different entirely. You might vanish into shadows for a few stolen minutes, a brief escape from the waking nightmare. Your body, utterly spent, might betray you, collapsing for a handful of heartbeats before the instinct for survival. The ever-present fear jolts you back to the stark reality of the trench. Each breath you take feels like a gamble, a silent prayer that the next shell, the next bullet, the next unseen threat will not find you. You hold your breath, then release it slowly, the cold air filling your lungs. A desperate act of living in a place that constantly whispers of death. In this desolate world, true, restorative sleep belongs only to the living, and even then, only barely. Now, feel the earth beneath you, not as firm ground, but as a living, grasping entity. The mud in these trenches isn't merely underfoot. It's an all-consuming force, a liquid grave that seeks to reclaim everything. Imagine it clinging to your boots, thick and heavy, each step a struggle against its relentless pull. It seeps into every fiber of your uniform, a cold, cloying embrace that no amount of washing can truly remove. You taste it in your food, gritty and metallic, a constant reminder of the desolation. And perhaps most disturbingly, you feel it in your lungs, a phantom weight that makes each breath laborious, as if you're slowly drowning in the very air. The cold earth numbs your skin, a creeping chill that begins at your extremities and slowly works its way inward. It is a persistent, insidious cold, seeping through your thin, damp clothing, stealing what little warmth your body tries to generate. You shiver, a deep, uncontrollable tremor that shakes your very core. These shivers, ironically, often jolt you back to consciousness from your brief, uneasy collapses. They are a constant companion, a physical manifestation of the bone-deep cold that defines every moment in this place. When exhaustion finally threatens to overpower you, when the sheer weight of fatigue becomes too immense to bear, you search for any solace, any fleeting comfort. Your helmet, heavy and cold, becomes a makeshift pillow, offering a meager, hard surface against the damp earth. It presses against your head, a constant reminder of your military existence, even in this desperate attempt at rest. Around you, and sometimes beside you, the fallen provide grim, silent barriers. A friend or a stranger, once full of life, now lies still, his body becoming an unplanned defense against the raw elements, a silent testament to the fragility of your own existence. It is a sobering, yet practical, reality of trench life. Many here sleep half in water, half in fear. The trench bottom is often a shallow, icy pool, and you find yourself partially submerged, the freezing water seeping into your boots, soaking your legs. The cold is piercing, an agony that makes true relaxation impossible. Yet your body, pushed beyond its limits, still craves those few moments of oblivion. And as you try to drift away, the ever-present fat rats, heavy with the dead they've scavenged, crawl over your chest, their cold, scaly feet a sudden, horrifying sensation against your skin. They are a constant, unwelcome presence, a living embodiment of the macabre reality. This is mud sleep, as the men called it, 5-minute collapses, snatched desperately between the terrifying crescendos of bombardments. You drop where you stand or fall, your body instantly succumbing to the overwhelming need for rest, only to be roused seconds or minutes later by another distant rumble, another sound of incoming fire. The earth, in its grim irony, becomes both your blanket and your coffin. It cradles your weary body, cold and indifferent, while simultaneously holding the promise of swallowing you whole. Should fate decree it, you exist in this liminal space between sleep and death, between the mud that cradles and the mud that claims. Within the damp, suffocating confines of the trench. A strange and unsettling symphony plays out, a constant backdrop to your existence. Listen closely, and you will hear it, the guttural snores of men utterly spent, ragged breaths fighting for air in the cramped space. There are the hacking coughs, dry and desperate, tearing through chests weakened by damp and disease. And then, woven through it all, the incessant gnawing of rats, a relentless, scratching sound that echoes in the dark, a vivid reminder of their scavenging presence. It is an orchestra of decay, a chilling score for the endless night. Sometimes, in their fitful, disturbed sleep, the men around you mutter. Soft, incoherent sounds escape their lips. Fragmented whispers that carry across the cold, damp air. They might call out for mothers, distant and comforting figures from a world that feels impossibly far away. Or perhaps they murmur the names of lovers, a yearning, fragile plea for tenderness that pierces through the brutal reality of the trench. These are the sounds of humanity at its most vulnerable, glimpses into the private landscapes of their shattered dreams. Then there are those who wake screaming, a sudden, piercing cry that rips through the night, startling everyone in its wake. Their eyes wide with terror, convinced they heard death coming, a phantom shell, a spectral bayonet. You hear their gasps, their rapid, frantic breathing, as they struggle to separate the vivid horrors of their slumber from the stark horrors of their reality. Their fear is palpable, a cold wave that washes over you, momentarily joining you in their waking nightmare. What truly unnerves you, however, is the silence. The moments between barrages, when the distant artillery momentarily ceases its weary heartbeat. These lulls are not peaceful. They are deafening. This sudden absence of sound feels louder than any explosion, a vast, echoing void that screams of what could be, what might be. In this hollow quiet, every tiny noise becomes amplified: the drip of water, the rustle of a rat, the ragged breath of the man beside you. It's a silence that is not empty, but pregnant with unspoken threats, with the weight of unseen dangers. In this world of constant threat, your senses sharpen, transforming you into a creature of pure vigilance. You learn to listen to the dirt itself, to the subtle shifts in its texture, to the faint sounds it might carry from above or below. You listen to the air, to the way the wind whispers through the wire, to the distant drone of an approaching plane, or the eerie quiet that precedes a gas attack. And most profoundly, you learn to listen to the dead beside you. You listen for the absence of sound, for the final stillness that marks their departure, a constant, chilling reminder of your own precarious existence. Sleeping together in the trench isn't about comfort. It's about survival. You are pressed against your comrades, their bodies a shared warmth against the biting cold, their presence a silent acknowledgement of collective vulnerability. You huddle in close, a cluster of desperate life amidst the encroaching death, each breath shared, each shiver understood. It's a grim, unsentimental intimacy born of necessity. In this trench, every single night sounds like the end of the world, a relentless symphony of fear, exhaustion, and the ever-present shadow of oblivion. And as you listen, you simply try to breathe, to exist, until the impossible dawn. As you breathe in deeply, the air itself tells a story, a dark, complex narrative that weaves itself into the very fabric of your being. This air is not clean or fresh. It is a heavy, almost tangible presence, a cloying blend of odors that define your every waking and sleeping moment. It reeks, perpetually, of gunpowder, the lingering metallic tang of recent explosions, the acrid bite of cordite that seems to settle on your tongue. Mixed with this is the sharp, human scent of sweat, a constant, unavoidable reminder of the physical exertion and fear that permeates daily life. There is the earthy, mineral smell of rust, emanating from the corroding metal of your rifle, your helmet, the very corrugated iron that lines parts of the trench, and underneath it all, a pervasive, sickening sweetness, the undeniable, inescapable stench of corpses, of decay, a smell that clings to everything like a shroud. Your blankets, thin and damp, absorb this grim cocktail of scents, never truly drying, always holding the cold, sour essence of the trench. Your raincoats, meant to offer protection, quickly become mildewed and moldy, adding their own musty, stagnant aroma to the oppressive atmosphere. Everything, absolutely everything you touch, everything you own, carries the indelible stench of death and decay. It permeates your uniform, your skin, your hair. You can feel it clinging to you, a second skin, an invisible but powerful weight. Over time, this smell doesn't just surround you, it becomes a part of you. It infuses your very body, sinks into your pores, and perhaps most disturbingly, it infiltrates your dreams. Even in the brief, fitful moments of unconsciousness, the phantom scent of the trenches follows you, weaving itself into the fabric of your subconscious. You might dream of gunpowder, not just hearing it, but smelling it, raw and metallic, as if you're still standing on the fire step. The strangest transformation is how you, a veteran of this hell, stop noticing it. The constant barrage of odors becomes so integrated into your sensory experience that it fades into the background. An accepted truth. It's a terrifying adaptation, a testament to the human capacity for endurance. But then, a newcomer arrives, fresh from a world where air still smells clean, and their reaction is stark. Their face blanches, their stomach heaves, and they gasp for breath, unable to process the overwhelming assault on their senses. Their struggle is a cruel mirror, reflecting back to you the sheer horror of what you have come to tolerate. They say, you could tell a soldier by his smell before you saw his face. And it's true. The unique, powerful stench of the trenches, of men living and dying in mud, gunpowder, and fear, became an identifier, a signature of those who had endured this particular crucible. It was a smell that no amount of scrubbing could entirely remove, a mark of the frontline experience that clung to them long after they left. Even decades later, veterans would speak of it, a ghost scent that followed them home, lingering in the quiet corners of their memory. Sometimes, rising unbidden in the dead of night, they'd describe catching a whiff of damp earth or a distant bonfire, and for a fleeting, terrifying moment, they were back in the trench, the full, suffocating aroma washing over them. Here, in the trench, sleep was not something you sought out of peace or comfort. It was something you earned, relentlessly. Through an exhaustion so profound, it transcended mere tiredness, a deep, soul-wearying fatigue that only the sheer weight of oblivion could momentarily ease. The chill in the trenches is not just uncomfortable, it's a silent, predatory force. Your coat, thin and threadbare, offers little defense against the biting cold that seems to seep into your very bones. Your blankets, perpetually wet from the incessant rain and damp earth, provide no genuine warmth, only a heavy, clammy covering that traps more cold than it generates. In this desolate environment, you become an expert in improvisation, a desperate artist crafting warmth from the meager materials at hand. You watch as men stuff sandbags into their uniforms, layering the rough fabric against their skin, hoping the grit and thickness will create some barrier against the biting wind. Or you see two men huddled together, sharing one threadbare coat, their bodies pressed close, seeking to cool their dwindling body heat. It is a quiet act of survival, a shared vulnerability in the face of an indifferent enemy, the cold itself. In these moments, you too might find yourself leaning into another, sharing the precious resource of human warmth. Sometimes, when the darkness feels too oppressive, when the cold seems to steal all hope, a flicker of light emerges. A soldier might dare to light a candle stub, its tiny flame a fragile beacon in the vast gloom. It offers little in the way of heat, a negligible warmth against the overwhelming chill. But its true value is in the light it casts. For a brief moment, it illuminates human faces, tired and drawn, but undeniably human. You see the lines of fatigue, the hollows of hunger, but also the flicker of a shared moment, a silent acknowledgement of existence in the face of oblivion. That tiny flame becomes a focal point, a symbol of resilience, and a testament to the enduring human need for connection. The cold here kills silently, insidiously. It's a more pervasive, often quicker killer than bullets or shrapnel. Hypothermia steals away consciousness, numbing the body until it simply ceases to function. You see comrades succumb, their bodies growing stiff, their breathing shallow, their eyes distant, even before a shot is fired. The constant damp, the lack of dry clothing, the relentless wind, these are the silent assassins of the trench. A faded diary note, scribbled on a damp page, echoes the desperate reality. We slept with each other's breath as our only fire. Imagine that profound intimacy, born not of affection, but of sheer survival. Two bodies curled together, facing each other, their faces close enough that their exhaled breaths mingle, creating a tiny, fleeting pocket of warmth against the overwhelming cold. It's a poignant image, a testament to the basic human instinct to survive, to find even the smallest spark of life in the face of utter desolation. In this context, warmth itself becomes a form of love, a quiet, unspoken kind that sustains life. It's not the romantic love of peacetime, but the deep, primal connection of shared hardship. A mutual recognition of vulnerability and the unspoken promise to simply exist alongside one another. The simple act of huddling together, of sharing a blanket, of offering a precious candle. These are profound gestures in a world stripped bare of comfort. In that endless darkness, amidst the mud and the cold, heat is not just a physical sensation, it is a symbol, a fragile but potent ember of hope that keeps you clinging to life, one shivering breath at a time. Consider, for a moment, the profound irony of closing your eyes in a place designed to keep them wide open in terror. To sleep in this hell is not merely a physical necessity. It is an act of defiance, a subtle rebellion against the grinding, ceaseless machinery of war. It is a moment, however fleeting, where you reclaim a small piece of your humanity, a silent assertion of your right to oblivion, even if it is a disturbed one. To sleep here is to believe, deep down in the tired, worn chambers of your heart, that you might wake up again. Each time you surrender to the encroaching darkness of unconsciousness, you are making a silent wager with fate. A fragile hope that the next morning's light will find you still among the living. It is a quiet, desperate act of optimism in a world that constantly preaches despair. Many men, before attempting to rest, would perform the solemn ritual of writing a farewell letter. They would carefully choose their words, perhaps to a mother, a wife, a child, just in case this particular descent into sleep proved to be their last, a final message sent out into the void. The officers, ever vigilant, ever aware of the dangers, strictly forbid dozing on watch. The perimeter must be observed, the enemy's movements tracked, the trench protected from sudden raids. But exhaustion, that relentless, bone-deep weariness, often wins. It's a battle fought within your own body, a desperate struggle between duty and the overwhelming need for repose. You see men leaning against the cold, damp earth of the trench wall, their rifles still clutched in their hands, their eyes fluttering shut for a fraction of a second, only to snap open again, startled and disoriented. They fight the droop of their eyelids, the heavy pull of sleep, knowing the severe consequences of a moment's lapse. Sometimes, pushed beyond human limits, soldiers learn to sleep standing up, propped against a support, their rifles still held loosely, ready to be raised at the first sign of trouble. Their bodies are technically at rest, but their hearts still race, their minds still on high alert, a constant hum of anxiety buzzing beneath the surface of their shallow slumber. It is a testament to the body's desperate ingenuity, finding ways to steal precious seconds of rest in the most impossible circumstances. In this endless cycle of horror and fatigue, sleep becomes the only true resistance left. When you close your eyes, even for a moment, the war, with its relentless noise and its pervasive dread, is momentarily silenced. As one soldier's reflection put it, "When I slept, the war stopped just for a heartbeat." In that brief, stolen interval, the shells ceased their roar, the rats disappeared, the mud softened. You were transported, however briefly, to a place where the conflict could not follow, a sanctuary of the mind. Even if it was haunted by its own terrors, it's a fragile, temporary victory. But in this landscape of defeat, even a heartbeat of peace is an act of profound, personal defiance. As the deep, oppressive darkness settles over the trench, you realize this desolate realm belongs not only to the living, weary soldiers, but also to an unseen, insidious population. The trench is home to more than just men. It is claimed by rats, bold and rapacious, scuttling through the mud, a constant, rustling presence. It is swarming with lice, tiny, relentless parasites that burrow into your skin, causing an incessant itch no scratching can ever truly satisfy. And then, there are the ghosts, not always spectral figures, but the heavy, lingering presence of those who have fallen, their spirits interwoven with the very soil. You might wake abruptly, startled by some sound or sensation, only to find yourself lying beside a fresh corpse. The man who was there just hours ago, breathing, suffering, hoping, is now still. His body, perhaps, is still warm, a chilling warmth that speaks of recent life, a stark contrast to the rapidly cooling dampness of the trench itself. There is no time for sentimentality, no space for prolonged mourning. You simply exist, side by side with the newly deceased, the raw reality of mortality pressing in on you. Every single night, someone dies. It is an immutable law of this brutal existence. One man breathes his last, his weary heart finally giving out, or a stray bullet finds its mark, or a shell lands too close, and almost as quickly, another takes his place in the cold, unforgiving mud, filling the vacancy, continuing the grim, relentless cycle of life and death in the trenches. The ranks are constantly shifting, an endless rotation of the living and the dead. There is a bitter, almost gallows humor among the soldiers that speaks volumes of their reality. They refer to these grim resting places as beds of the fallen. It is a dark jest, a way to cope with the unspeakable, to find a sliver of dark levity in the face of constant horror. The casualness of the phrase, its understated brutality, hammers home the absolute dehumanization of their existence. Here, in the cold, damp embrace of the trench, sleep and death share an eerily similar posture. A man asleep, utterly exhausted, his face slack, his body still, can look remarkably like a man who has passed, in the low light or in the utter darkness. It is often impossible to tell who is still breathing, who is merely lost in the depths of a fitful, nightmare-ridden slumber, and who has finally found eternal rest. The line between these two states blurs, becoming almost indistinguishable. Life, in its most desperate form, curls beside death, hoping against hope not to trade places. You huddle there, your breath shallow, your senses alert, acutely aware of the stillness beside you, or the restless stirring of a comrade still clinging to existence. It is a grim communion, a silent promise to yourself that you will resist, that you will endure, that your life will not be claimed by this trench tonight. The night visitors, both corporeal and spectral, are a constant reminder of the thin veil separating your fragile existence from the ultimate, inescapable oblivion. When true sleep, the natural, restorative kind, simply refuses to come, when the mind races with terror and the body aches with unbearable tension, men turn to other means. They drink, swallow, or smoke it, desperate for any escape, any semblance of oblivion. Alcohol becomes a temporary duller of the nerves, a harsh, burning liquid that numbs the sharp edges of fear and anxiety. It doesn't bring peace, but it offers a brief, fleeting reprieve from the relentless torment of a mind on high alert. You might see a man take a swig from a communal flask, his eyes momentarily losing their haunted look, before the reality of the trench slowly seeps back in. More potent and far more dangerous is the solace offered by morphine. This powerful opiate turns terror into silence, transforming the screaming chaos of the trench into a muffled, distant echo. It wraps the mind in a warm, cottony haze, a temporary balm for the deepest wounds of the soul. Field medics, overwhelmed and often desperate themselves, would distribute these pills like prayer beads, small, white promises of peace in a world utterly devoid of it. Each pill was a momentary blessing, a fleeting journey to a place beyond the trench's suffocating grasp. But this chemical escape comes at a steep price. Many soldiers, once introduced to the numbing power of these substances, quickly grew addicted. The choice was stark, yet terrifyingly simple. Better to be haunted by the cravings and the fogginess of addiction than to remain fully, painfully awake, constantly bombarded by the horrors of the trenches. The immediate relief outweighed the distant consequences, a testament to the unbearable pressure under which they lived. They would whisper, their voices low and weary. "We didn't sleep, we escaped." This statement speaks volumes about the nature of their chemically induced repose. It wasn't natural rest. It was a forced exile from reality, a temporary banishment of consciousness. The line between sedation and surrender blurred, becoming almost indistinguishable. Was it courage to seek relief, or a capitulation to the overwhelming weight of their circumstances? The question lingered, unanswered and unanswerable, in the hearts of those who sought this chemical oblivion. Yet, even in these chemically induced states, nightmares still waited. They might be different, less vivid, perhaps more surreal, but they were ever present, lurking either within the drug-addled mind or just outside the periphery of consciousness, ready to pounce the moment the sedative began to wear off. The horrors of the trench, once experienced, were not easily banished. They burrowed deep, finding new ways to manifest, even in the artificial peace of a drugged sleep. The relief was temporary, the escape incomplete, for the trench, with its mud and its dead and its relentless thunder, had already taken root deep within them, a haunting presence that no chemical could truly eradicate. Dawn, in the trenches, does not bring healing. It brings exposure. As the first pale, bruised light begins to seep over the shattered horizon, pushing back the deep, oppressive darkness, it doesn't wash away the horrors of the night. Instead, it illuminates them, starkly, cruelly. The faint gray light reveals the true extent of the suffering, the silent battles fought and lost in the hours of darkness. You feel the harsh reality of the new day immediately. Your eyes are swollen, heavy from the fitful, disturbed attempts at sleep, or perhaps from the tears swallowed in the dark. Your lips are cracked and dry, a constant source of discomfort, parched from the cold, damp air, and the lack of proper hydration. Your skin, visible beneath the layers of grime and mud, is frozen gray, a pallid testament to the perpetual cold that has seeped into every cell of your body. You feel stiff, achy, as if your bones have turned to lead. The first hesitant rays of light, creeping over the parapet, serve a crucial, if painful, purpose. They reveal who survived the night. With a quiet dread, your eyes scan the faces around you, searching for familiar forms, for the subtle rise and fall of chests, for any sign of life. Each morning is a silent roll call, a grim accounting of who remains and who has joined the silent company. A sigh of relief, often unspoken, escapes you if the man beside you stirs. A shared acknowledgement of another dawn endured. Then, the ritual begins. A series of automatic movements, almost robotic in their repetition. A cigarette is pulled from a crumpled pack, its dry tobacco a small comfort, its smoke a fleeting plume against the chill air. A mug of coffee, black and bitter, is passed around, its warmth a welcome sensation against cold hands, its caffeine a desperate attempt to jumpstart the weary mind. And then, silence. A profound, heavy silence that is different from the lull between barrages. This is the silence of shared exhaustion, of unspoken dread, of men simply existing, trying to gather their thoughts before the day's brutality truly begins. Eventually, hollow jokes might return, forced and automatic, a desperate attempt to inject some semblance of normalcy into the abnormal. They are not genuinely funny, these jests, but they serve as a social lubricant, a way to acknowledge the shared absurdity without delving too deeply into the pain. No one mentions sleep. That word, in this context, feels cursed, heavy with the weight of its impossibility, its absence a constant, aching reality. To speak of it would be to acknowledge the depth of their deprivation, the true toll of their existence. Another day begins exactly where the last one ended. There is no fresh start, no new beginning. The mud is still there. The cold is still biting. The enemy is still across the way. The cycle of fear, exhaustion, and survival simply restarts, day after grim day, stretching out into what feels like an endless, unchanging panorama of suffering. You take another drag from your cigarette, another sip of coffee, and prepare to face the relentless, unforgiving reality of the trench. Even years later, long after the last shot was fired, long after the mud of France had dried on their boots, the trenches remained. They returned in the silent hours of the night, twisting and reshaping the peaceful sanctuaries of home into landscapes of lingering terror. Veterans, now far removed from the front line, still dreamed of the trenches, their sleep forever haunted by the echoes of a war that refused to be forgotten. The thunder, that incessant, rhythmic booming of artillery, would reverberate not from distant fields, but from the deep recesses of their unconscious minds. The pervasive, grasping mud, with its cold, cloying embrace, would seep into their dreamscapes, clinging to their phantom boots, staining their imaginary uniforms. And the smell, that unforgettable, complex cocktail of gunpowder, sweat, rust, and decay, would rise unbidden, a phantom scent that would jerk them awake, heart pounding, convinced they were back in that suffocating embrace. True rest, the kind that truly rejuvenates and cleanses the spirit, became an impossibility once they left the front. The experience of the trenches had rewired something fundamental within them. Every quiet night, every soft bed, every moment of peace was tinged with an underlying tremor, an echo of distant shells. The world had gone silent, but the war continued its relentless, unseen assault within their memories, within their very souls, as one veteran poignantly described it. We left the war, but it never left our beds. The trenches followed them, infiltrating the sanctity of their homes, transforming the very places meant for repose into extensions of their past torment. The quiet of a peacetime night was often punctuated by the phantom sound of distant explosions, the imagined scuttling of rats, the chilling sense of unseen eyes watching them from the dark. Their sleep was forever fractured, a fragile landscape constantly on the verge of collapsing back into the nightmares of 1916. In memory, the trench never drained. It never dried up, never ceased its relentless hold. It only waited, a timeless, insidious entity, ready to resurface in the quiet hours, in moments of vulnerability, a constant reminder of what they had endured. And as you consider these stories, as you absorb the weight of this past, history itself whispers back, a gentle, sorrowful plea. echoing through the ages. Rest, if you can. Cast your mind back, if only for a moment, to that fateful summer of 1914. The air, crisp and imbued with a vibrant optimism, held promises of swift triumphs, of glorious marches under a benevolent sun. You can almost hear the distant echoes of generals, their voices confident and booming. Maps spread wide across polished tables, charting paths of rapid advance. They pictured armies sweeping across the land like a gentle, invigorating breeze, not a devastating, relentless storm. Perhaps you imagined grand parades, flags waving proudly, their colors bright against a hopeful sky, cheers echoing through city streets, a swift resolution that would see everyone home by Christmas. That very thought, so vivid and optimistic, now feels like a whisper from a forgotten dream. A fragile memory time has almost erased. The fields, then green and vast, stretched out beneath an innocent sky, waiting, it seemed, to bear witness to a chivalrous dance of courage and strategy, rather than the slow, suffocating embrace of the earth. You might have felt a lightness in your step, a shared certainty that this fleeting conflict would be brief, a mere footnote in history, a summer storm passing quickly, leaving only clear, refreshed skies. There was a prevailing belief, almost a mantra, that movement and daring would win the day, that the spirit of offensive action, the elan vital, as some called it, would triumph. But even then, as you watched the leaves turn from vibrant green to russet and gold, signaling the quiet arrival of autumn, an unseen, pervasive weight began to settle. A chill, not of the season, but of something far more profound, started to creep into the heart of Europe. The dreams, once so bright and unblemished, began to fray at the edges, like old tapestries worn thin by too many seasons. And you, standing on the precipice of an unknown future, felt a subtle shift, a quiet tremor in the ground beneath your feet, hinting at a reality far removed from the imagined glory. The initial dynamism, the surge of armies across borders, faded with a profound and unsettling finality. What began as a sweeping, hopeful movement, a grand strategy of rapid advance, became something entirely different. It became a suffocation, a world buried alive, trapped in the unforgiving embrace of the very ground itself. The last breath of true mobility, that exhilarating freedom of open warfare, died a quiet, almost imperceptible death beneath tangled barbed wire, in fields that quickly transformed from verdant stretches into churning seas of mud. You would come to realize, with a heavy heart, that the war, refusing to move, had found a way to freeze in place, not just in the mud, but in the very souls of those who fought it. As you delve deeper into this quiet history, you begin to understand that this sudden paralysis wasn't for lack of grand designs. Far from it. Both sides, in the early days, clung to ambitious blueprints, plans drawn with bold strokes and fervent belief. On one side, you had Germany's daring gamble, known as the Schlieffen Plan. Imagine the detailed maps, the intricate timetables, the belief in crushing France with a swift, overwhelming sweep through neutral Belgium. It was a strategy built on speed and decisive force, designed to avoid a protracted two-front war. You can almost feel the weight of expectation on the shoulders of those who enacted it, the belief that victory lay just beyond the next horizon, a few weeks, perhaps even days, away. Then, across the lines, you see the French response Plan 7, It was a strategy steeped in fierce, almost blind courage, aimed straight into the formidable German guns in Alsace and Lorraine. This was less about complex maneuvers and more about the raw power of the offensive, a belief in the inherent strength and spirit of the French soldier. You can almost picture the determined faces, the unwavering resolve, marching forward, convinced that their fervor would break any defense. The air hummed with this fervent, almost desperate, hope on both sides. But the summer of 1914, so full of promise, quickly turned to a grim autumn. On a single, horrifying day, August 22nd, you can imagine the chilling reality. Nearly 20,000 Frenchmen vanished amidst a storm of fire. A number so vast it almost defies comprehension, evaporating into the chaos and noise of battle. A stark, brutal testament to the destructive power of modern weaponry meeting outdated tactics. It was a massacre that shattered illusions, a premonition of the scale of slaughter to come. Then came the Battle of the Marne. You can almost feel the collective breath held across Europe as the German advance, seemingly unstoppable, reached the very gates of Paris. It was here, in a desperate, last-ditch effort, that the miracle of the Marne unfolded, halting the German dream of a swift victory, pushing them back, denying them the ultimate prize. You might imagine the relief, the fleeting surge of hope, but also the grim understanding that this was no quick war. The tide had been stopped. Yes, but the waves of conflict continued to crash. What followed was a frantic, almost desperate chase, a tactical scramble known as the race to the sea. Both sides, having failed to achieve decisive breakthroughs, now stretched their flanks northward, each trying to outflank the other, to find an open door, a weak point to exploit. You envision soldiers marching relentlessly, pushing themselves to the very edge of exhaustion, kilometer after kilometer, their bodies aching, their hopes dwindling with each step. But every time one side tried to move around the other, the opposing force would extend its own lines, creating a continuous, unbroken front. And when the dust, mingled with the first frosts of autumn, finally settled, a grim reality emerged. No decisive breakthrough had occurred. Instead, the relentless, almost unconscious expansion of forces had created something entirely new, something terrifying in its implications, a continuous wall of trenches. Crude at first, then ever more intricate, now sealed Europe's fate. Stretching from the rugged peaks of the Alps all the way to the windswept shores of the English Channel. This was not a war of movement, but a war rooted, entrenched, in the very earth itself. And you, observing this transformation from the quiet distance of history, understand that the era of grand, sweeping plans had collapsed, giving way to a brutal, static reality. As you settle deeper into this historical journey, you begin to perceive the stark truth that underlay this sudden paralysis, the advent of a terrifying new machinery of death. The very nature of warfare had transformed, stealthily but utterly, almost overnight. What was once the domain of individual skill in close-quarters combat had given way to a terrifying, impersonal efficiency. Artillery, for instance, evolved into a godlike presence on the battlefield, fast, precise, and relentlessly destructive. You can almost feel the ground tremble beneath your feet, hear the chilling, distant whistle, growing rapidly into a deafening roar as a shell tears through the air. These were not the cumbersome cannons of old. These were instruments of pure devastation. The French 75mm gun, a marvel of engineering for its time, could unleash a barrage of shells with astonishing rapidity, scattering its lethal payload across wide areas. Its German counterparts, the heavy guns, were capable of shattering men and fortifications from distances that were once unimaginable. Imagine the eerie feeling of being under such a bombardment, knowing that death could arrive at any moment, from an unseen, untouchable hand, a force miles away, orchestrating your demise with chilling accuracy. The landscape itself, once familiar and comforting, became a chaotic canvas of explosions, splintered trees, and churned earth. And then there was the insidious hum of the machine guns. Imagine it like the relentless, mechanical thrum of a factory line, churning out death with almost indifferent efficiency. These were not mere weapons. They were instruments of mass production, capable of spitting out 500 bullets per minute, transforming open fields into impassable killing zones. You can almost hear the rhythmic rat-a-tat-tat, a sound that quickly became synonymous with the obliteration of human life. Charging into such a storm was not bravery. It was a desperate gamble against overwhelming, unthinking force. The traditional rifle, too, had been refined. Equipped with smokeless powder, it eliminated the telltale plume of smoke that once gave away a shooter's position, making snipers almost invisible, turning every shadow into a potential threat. Steel-jacketed shells, more lethal and precise, pierced flesh and bone with brutal efficiency. Together, these technological advancements weren't just changing the tools of war. They were erasing the very notion of chivalry, of valor in the traditional sense. The romanticized image of war, passed down through generations, shattered like glass under the weight of this new, terrifying reality. The open battlefield, once a stage for grand maneuvers and displays of courage, transformed into a killing field where individual bravery suddenly seemed meaningless, an exercise in futility. Picture a soldier, heart pounding, adrenaline coursing, wanting desperately to advance, to make a difference. But the moment you stood up, the moment you exposed yourself, you became a target. It was a brutal, simple truth that quickly permeated every corner of the front stand-up, and you die. This realization settled over the armies like a cold, heavy fog. The ground, which had once been a pathway to victory, became the only sanctuary. To survive, you had to disappear, to melt into the earth, to become one with the mud. The very landscape itself, once a backdrop, had become the primary adversary for those who dared to move within its deadly gaze. And as you quietly observe this shift, you understand that the industrial age had brought not just progress, but a profoundly new and terrifying way for humanity to destroy itself. The echoes of previous conflicts, the grand narratives of heroism and glorious charges, still resonated in the minds of many in the early days of this transforming war. Generals, steeped in doctrines of aggressive offensive, continued to preach elan vital, the sacred spirit of the offensive. This was a belief in the unstoppable force of will, the idea that sheer courage and an unwavering attacking spirit could overcome any obstacle. You can almost hear their impassioned speeches, delivered far behind the lines, filled with stirring words about valor and national pride, encouraging their men to press forward, no matter the cost. Captain Billard, a figure perhaps lost to the wider narratives of history, but emblematic of the era, famously declared that science itself would bow to the indomitable spirit of courage. He and many others believed that the human element, the fire in the belly, the willingness to sacrifice, would ultimately triumph over the cold, calculated efficiency of new weaponry. Imagine the young soldiers, eager and idealistic, listening to such pronouncements, their hearts swelling with a sense of duty and a desire to prove their mettle. The belief was that the human spirit, resilient and unyielding, could somehow bend the brutal realities of modern combat to its will. But courage, however profound and deeply felt, proved to be a fleeting, fragile flame under the relentless storm of lead. The machine guns, the precise artillery, the smokeless rifles, these did not discriminate. They did not care for courage or conviction. Picture a soldier, fueled by adrenaline and the call of duty, rising from cover, only to be met by an invisible wall of bullets, a sudden, brutal silencing. The vibrant spirit that propelled them forward burned fast and bright, then flickered out, leaving only a chilling stillness. Even Charles de Gaulle, then just a young officer observing the unfolding horror, watched in somber reflection as valor, once celebrated and revered, turned with alarming speed to silence. He witnessed firsthand how the old notions of heroism, of individual acts of daring, crumbled before the impersonal, overwhelming might of industrial warfare. It was a profound and brutal lesson, etched into the very landscape of battle. Within weeks, not months, entire regiments, once strong and vibrant formations of men, melted away. Imagine the shock, the disbelief, as companies that began with hundreds were reduced to mere handfuls. Bravery, it became starkly apparent, offered no armor against the hail of shrapnel and bullets. It was not enough to be courageous. It was not enough to be daring. The rules had changed, profoundly and irrevocably. By September, as the crisp autumn air deepened into a biting chill, a new, somber understanding permeated the front lines. The only survivors, the ones who endured, were not necessarily the bravest, nor the strongest, but those who learned to dig, those who, instinctually or through brutal instruction, understood that safety lay not in advancing forward, but in sinking down into the protective embrace of the earth. You can almost feel the desperate scrape of shovels, the tearing of earth and roots, as men frantically sought refuge, a grim acknowledgement that the age of open warfare and the heroism it celebrated had truly ended, leaving only the cold, hard ground as a silent witness to its demise. With the crushing realization that movement meant death, and courage offered no shield, a profound transformation began to unfold across the Western Front. Soldiers, driven by a primal instinct for survival, began to claw at the earth. You can almost feel the coarse dirt under your fingernails, the ache in your muscles, as you join them in this desperate, unceasing labor. They dug like animals seeking refuge from a relentless storm, scraping out shallow scrapes, then deeper pits, then connecting these holes with hastily excavated ditches. The ground, once merely the stage for battle, now became the only sanctuary, a silent, unyielding protector against the torrent of steel and lead above. One officer, observing this desperate improvisation, penned a chillingly prescient thought. "A trench," he wrote, "is untouchable by artillery." This statement, born of necessity and observation, encapsulated the new reality. Above ground, you were exposed, vulnerable, a target. Below ground, you found a fragile, temporary reprieve. Imagine the sheer relief, the collective exhale, as men descended into these crude depressions, feeling the earth closing around them, a heavy, comforting blanket against the storm. The world above, a landscape of explosions and whistling death, was suddenly, if only partially, muted, held at bay. Mud quickly became a second skin. You would feel its cold, clinging weight seep into your clothing, coating your boots, making every movement a struggle. It seeped into your soul, too, a constant, grimy companion. It was omnipresent, unavoidable, transforming the very texture of existence. The constant rain, the churned earth, the endless digging, all contributed to a viscous, inescapable reality. And the world above, the one you had known, the one that once promised liberty and life, had become nothing less than death itself. To venture above the parapet was to invite almost certain doom. What was initially conceived as a temporary pause in the grand march, a brief respite before the next advance, rapidly solidified into something far more permanent, far more insidious. The trench, meant as a momentary shelter, morphed into a prison, a labyrinthine existence from which there seemed no escape. You would feel the psychological weight of it, the walls of earth closing in, the claustrophobia of a subterranean life, knowing that beyond the mud, danger loomed. From the rugged borders of Switzerland, winding its way northward, all the way to the windswept shores of the sea, the earth literally opened its mouth. It swallowed men whole, not in a sudden, dramatic gulp, but in a slow, relentless consumption. The ground became a vast, living tomb, absorbing lives, hopes, and dreams into its cold, indifferent embrace. You might reflect on the sheer scale of it, mile after mile of dug-out earth, a testament to human desperation and resilience. The front line, once a dynamic concept of shifting positions, no longer advanced. It festered. You can almost feel the stagnation, the slow decay, the sense of being trapped in a wound that would not heal. It was a war transformed, not into one of decisive maneuvers, but into one of attrition, of endurance, of simply holding on within the confines of the earth. And as you gaze upon this quiet, profound shift, you understand that the trenches were not merely defensive structures. They were the very embodiment of a new, horrifying chapter in human conflict. A chapter where the ground itself became both a coffin and a fragile, temporary home. As the war settled into its static, subterranean existence, you begin to perceive another layer of profound disjunction, the chaos that permeated the very core of command. Armies had swelled to unprecedented sizes. Vast human tides stretched across hundreds of miles, far too immense for any single general, or even a small cadre of leaders, to truly control. Imagine the overwhelming scale of it: millions of men, countless horses, tons of equipment, all spread thin across a landscape that had become a bewildering, dangerous maze. Lines of communication, once reliable threads connecting the brain of the army to its limbs, were shattered with chilling regularity by relentless shell fire. Telephone wires, laid with immense effort, were routinely severed. Runners, dispatched with vital messages, vanished into the smoke and fury of battle. You can almost feel the growing frustration, the desperate attempts to convey orders and receive intelligence, knowing that crucial information might never reach its intended recipient. The roar of artillery, the crackle of distant rifles, the pervasive smell of cordite, all combined to create a fog, not just of war, but of information, orders, vital for coordinating attacks and defenses. Crawled forward on horseback, a method little changed for centuries, while the battles themselves evolved with terrifying speed, often within seconds. A general might issue an order based on information hours old, only for the situation on the ground to have entirely transformed by the time it reached the front. You can almost see the messengers, galloping through churned fields, their faces grim, knowing that their message might already be obsolete. A whisper into a hurricane. The pace of information flow simply could not keep pace with the brutal, instantaneous reality of the fighting. Generals, once lauded for their strategic brilliance, found themselves in an impossible position. Many were replaced, humiliated, unable to grasp the new dynamics of warfare, unable to hear the true voices of their own men, those who existed in the mud and the despair. You might feel a pang of empathy, understanding their predicament, but also the bitter resentment of the soldiers who felt abandoned, unseen, their desperate pleas for support lost in the chasm of distance and poor communication. The very idea of an all-seeing, all-knowing commander became a cruel fiction. A few kilometers of wire, one frustrated officer lamented, expressing the profound disconnect, would have won the day. He wasn't speaking of barbed wire, but of communication wire, the simple, crucial infrastructure that could bridge the gap between decision and execution. You can sense the deep irony here in an age of astonishing industrial progress. A simple telegraph wire became a precious, almost mythical link, often absent when it was needed most. The war, you realize, had become a monster no one could truly steer. It was a colossal, lumbering beast with a will of its own, driven by inertia and the relentless cycle of attack and defense. Commanders could only feed it, sending more men, more materiel, into its insatiable maw, hoping against hope that some unseen force would eventually tame it. But the monster, born of technology and human folly, continued its rampage, largely unguided, its destructive path etched into the very landscape. And you, observing this, feel a quiet understanding of the immense, almost tragic, scale of human endeavor pitted against an indifferent, unmanageable chaos. As the static lines solidified and the mechanisms of command faltered, you begin to witness the devastating consequences of this fundamental disconnect. The battlefield, already a terrifying tableau, transformed into a landscape of profound disorder, where the left hand often knew nothing of what the right was doing. Artillery, for instance, frequently fired blind, its powerful shells thundering down not on enemy positions, but often on empty ground, or, tragically, sometimes even on its own advancing infantry. You can almost hear the bewildered cries, the frantic signals, as soldiers on the front lines watched, helpless, as their own support rained down destruction around them, a terrifying betrayal from unseen allies. Infantry attacks, launched with immense courage and sacrifice, often proceeded without any meaningful support. Picture lines of men clambering over the parapet, bayonets fixed, hearts pounding, expecting a protective barrage of shells to clear the way. But too often, that support never materialized. They marched into an unbroken storm of machine gun fire and rifle blasts, their vulnerability brutally exposed, the lack of coordination, a critical flaw in this new kind of warfare, turned brave charges into suicidal sprints. Liaison officers, tasked with bridging the communication gap between different units, often vanished in the smoke and chaos, swallowed by the sheer ferocity of the battlefield. Messages, vital for synchronizing efforts, were lost, shredded by shell fire, or simply never delivered. You can almost feel the gnawing anxiety of a commander waiting for news, for confirmation, only to be met with a deafening silence, a vacuum of information that spelled disaster. The fog of war was not just metaphorical. It was thick, tangible, and deadly. Men charged alone into the storm, their bravery a tragic testament to their lack of information. They were unaware that their supporting guns had never fired, or that the unit to their flank had been annihilated. Envision the desperate surge forward, the hope in their eyes, quickly replaced by confusion, then despair, as they realized their isolation. A captain, his face etched with unspeakable horror, watched his entire company vanish into the maelstrom, utterly alone. No artillery came to help, he would later recount, his voice hollow, a chilling testament to the devastating failure of coordination. General Joffre, in a desperate attempt to stem the tide of such pointless slaughter, eventually forbade attacks without proper artillery support. It was a recognition of the brutal lesson learned through countless lost lives. But desperation, a powerful and insidious force, often ignored such orders. Commanders on the ground, under immense pressure to achieve a breakthrough, to move, to do something, would sometimes send their men over the top, fueled by dwindling hope and an almost suicidal optimism. You can almost feel the internal conflict, the heavy weight of command, the impossible choices made in moments of profound terror. The rhythm of war, once a structured sequence of advance and defense, had degenerated into pure confusion. It was a deadly echo with no conductor, a chaotic symphony of violence and miscommunication. Imagine the jarring discord, the lack of harmony, as units fought their own isolated battles, often unaware of the larger picture, often unaware of their own impending doom. This failure to coordinate, born from vast distances and technological limitations, exacted an unbearable toll, turning battlefields into grinding meat grinders, fueled by misunderstanding and the terrible cost of broken connections. And you, observing this fragmented reality, understand the tragic irony that in a war of unprecedented scale, the smallest failures in communication often led to the greatest human suffering. As you immerse yourself deeper into the lived experience of this static war, you begin to appreciate the sheer, grueling physical burden placed upon the soldiers, even when not directly in combat. The trenches might have been fixed, but the journey to and from them was an endless, exhausting ordeal. Troops routinely marched 18 to 25 miles a day, their bodies pushed to the brink of collapse. You can almost feel the relentless pounding of your feet on unforgiving terrain, the slow, agonizing burn in your calves, mile after weary mile. And this march wasn't undertaken lightly. Each soldier carried a formidable load, about 57 pounds of equipment on their backs. Imagine the straps digging into your shoulders, the weight pressing down on your spine, every breath a conscious effort. This included rifles, ammunition, rations, water, digging tools, gas masks, and personal effects. A mobile home of necessity and survival, all carried by human strength and willpower. The sheer physical demand was immense, turning every movement into a monumental effort. The logistical arteries of the armies, vital for supplying these vast forces, also struggled under the strain. Horses, indispensable for pulling wagons and artillery, collapsed from exhaustion and starvation, their bodies sinking into the ever-present mud. You might hear their distressed whinnies, the heavy thud as they gave out, adding to the grim tableau of the battlefield. Wagons, laden with precious supplies, frequently sank, axle deep, into the same viscous mud, rendering their contents unreachable, leaving men and machines without their lifeblood. The very ground, again, conspired against them. Railways, the marvel of industrial transportation, paradoxically favored the defenders. They could swiftly move troops and supplies to a threatened sector, reinforcing their lines with remarkable efficiency. But for the attackers, once they moved beyond the railheads, the journey for supplies became agonizingly slow and arduous. You can almost feel the bitter injustice the attackers starved while the enemy ate. The momentum of any advance slowly bleeding away due to logistical limitations. The initial impetus of an offensive would inevitably grind to a halt, not just by enemy fire, but by the simple, inescapable reality of hunger and lack. A German soldier named Heigl, his words echoing through the decades, recounted a chilling incident. A comrade shot himself. He could not bear it. This stark, heartbreaking confession speaks volumes about the profound psychological and physical toll of this endless burden. Reflect on the depths of despair, the absolute exhaustion that could drive a man to such a desperate act, away from the enemy, away from the mud, into a final, quiet release. The weight on their backs was not just physical. It was a crushing weight on their very souls. Artillery, the lifeblood of any offensive, consistently lagged behind the infantry it was meant to protect. Its heavy guns, dragged by straining teams of horses and men, moved at a snail's pace through the cratered, muddy terrain. You can almost feel the slow, grinding frustration as the infantry pushed forward, knowing their vital support was miles behind, stuck in the mire, rendering their courage almost meaningless. Each kilometer gained, each arduous step forward, came at an unimaginable cost. It wasn't just 1,000 lives. It felt like half a soul, slowly chipped away by the relentless burden, the endless march, and the profound, wearying sense of being perpetually behind. And you, observing this, feel a quiet understanding of the silent, unseen suffering that permeated every aspect of this profoundly human, yet utterly dehumanizing, conflict. As you delve into the intricate mechanics of this static war, you uncover another critical factor that cemented its unyielding grip: the brutal reality of dwindling resources. The grand plans of 1914, predicated on swift campaigns, had underestimated everything, particularly the sheer, ravenous consumption of ammunition. Artillery stocks, initially prepared and budgeted to last for perhaps 6 months of conflict, vanished with terrifying speed in just 6 short weeks. You can almost hear the frantic reports, the stunned disbelief of quartermasters, as their meticulously calculated inventories were decimated by the relentless demands of the front. Factories, caught utterly unprepared for this industrial-scale slaughter, simply couldn't keep pace. They were designed for peacetime production, for a different kind of war. The gears of industry, slow to turn and retool, struggled to meet the insatiable appetite for shells, bullets, and powder. As a result, shells, once seemingly limitless, became rationed like precious food. Imagine the anguish of artillerymen, their guns capable of immense destruction, standing by, impotent, because the ammunition simply wasn't there. Every round became precious, every shot a careful consideration, rather than a continuous deluge. Without the protective, earth-shattering bombardment, assaults became an exercise in futility, dying before they even truly began. Infantry, without the softening of enemy lines, without the suppression of machine guns, simply couldn't advance. You can almost feel the wave of despair that washed over the men preparing for an attack, knowing in their hearts that without the thunder of their own guns, their sacrifice would be in vain. The battlefield, once a stage for grand gestures, became a silent testament to the absence of the tools of war. Meanwhile, the defenders, granted precious time by these logistical failures, dug deeper. They fortified their positions, layer after agonizing layer of barbed wire, creating impassable obstacles. The trenches themselves became intricate, subterranean cities with dugouts, command posts, and medical stations, all protected by an ever-increasing maze of mud and earth. You can almost hear the rhythmic scrape of shovels, the clang of pickaxes, as the earth absorbed men and their fortifications, growing ever more formidable, ever more impenetrable. "It's impossible to get rid of those Englishmen," a German soldier wrote, his words reflecting the grim realization that the defensive power of the trenches, coupled with the inability to sustain a prolonged offensive, had created an unbreakable stalemate. You can sense the frustration, the weariness, the dawning understanding that this was not a war that could be won by a single, decisive blow, but by a long, grinding process of attrition, a battle of wills against an unyielding environment. The front, then, turned from a battleground into an architectural endeavor. It became an endless, deadly architecture, built not of brick and mortar, but of earth, mud, and human suffering. Reflect on the sheer scale of it, mile after mile of fortifications, a testament to the ingenuity and grim determination of both sides. This wasn't just a temporary hold. It was a vast, man-made barrier, a scar etched deep into the landscape of Europe, a physical manifestation of a conflict that refused to end, slowly consuming lives and hope, one precious shell, one arduous day at a time. As our journey nears its gentle close, you are left with the indelible image of the trench itself, a profound symbol, a dark and confined world beneath the world. It was often described, with chilling accuracy, as a coffin without a lid. You can almost feel the damp, cold earth pressing in, the oppressive weight of the world above. The sky, when visible, was a distant, indifferent blue, a stark contrast to the grim reality below. The air, thick with the stench of stagnant water, decaying refuse, and something far more primal, the pervasive, inescapable odor of human fear and death, became a constant, suffocating companion. Life in this subterranean existence revolved around a new, grim trinity reign: rats and corpses. You can almost feel the ceaseless drip of water, turning the trench floor into a quagmire, saturating everything, making warmth an impossible dream. You can almost hear the rustling, scurrying sounds of rats, bold and omnipresent, their eyes glinting in the gloom, feasting on the same meager rations, sharing your confined space. And the corpses, they were everywhere, sometimes buried shallowly, sometimes simply left where they fell. They became part of the landscape, a silent, constant reminder of the fragility of life and the futility of hope. They were woven into the fabric of daily existence, a grim tapestry of human suffering. Soldiers, trapped in this stagnant purgatory, begged for orders to move, not necessarily to advance, not even to charge, but simply to move. to feel life again, to shake off the oppressive inertia, to break free from the suffocating embrace of the mud and the ceaseless waiting. You can almost hear their whispered pleas, their desperate longing for some kind of change, any change, that would signify an end to the agonizing stasis. The very act of movement, once taken for granted, became a desperate yearning, a symbol of freedom and vitality. But none came. The orders, when they did arrive, were for holding the line, for digging deeper, for enduring. The waiting itself became the war. You might feel the profound psychological toll of it, the days bleeding into weeks, weeks into months. The monotony broken only by moments of terrifying, indiscriminate violence. The human spirit, resilient as it was tested to its absolute limits by this ceaseless, grinding inactivity. The quiet despair of a war that refused to offer anything but more of the same. 3 agonizing years stretched on, a seemingly endless period of static death, before new weapons and new tactics, born of this very stalemate, finally began to break the riddle of the trenches. Tanks, poison gas, creeping barrages. These were the desperate innovations that slowly, painfully, began to chip away at the impenetrable defenses. But even then, the cost remained astronomical, the suffering immense. The modern world, the world we inhabit today, was born not from a swift, glorious victory, not from heroic charges across open fields, but from the brutal, unyielding reality of the mud. It was forged in the damp, claustrophobic confines of those trenches, shaped by the desperation and endurance of the men who lived and died within them. And as you gently drift back to the present, you carry with you the quiet understanding that the profound transformation of warfare, the indelible lessons of human resilience and suffering, were all unearthed, slowly and painfully, from the silent, all-consuming mud. Let that thought settle gently within you as you drift into a peaceful slumber, the echoes of history softly fading into the night.